Bert and I are going to be doing some interactive exercises that help us to learn more about, to enter into the passage that we heard this morning from Matthew 5. This is part of our Praise and Peacemaking series where we are seeking to practice with our bodies some of these peacemaking skills that we're talking about. And today we'll be drawing from Walter Wink's teachings on creative nonviolence. I think Troy, I'm not sure if he's here today, shared a few weeks ago about how impactful Walter Wink was to him, and it brought back for me as well, and then I learned for Bert too, just how much Walter Wink's teachings have impacted us in our reading of Matthew 5 and Jesus' teachings there. So I'll pass the mic to Bert to start us off.
So I want to start with a little disclaimer. Because we're talking about nonviolence, specifically nonviolent resistance to oppression. That's how this is framed by Walter Wink. And I want to start out by saying that I am not particularly good at this. In fact, I recently demonstrated that I'm rather bad at it. And to let you know, I have to tell you a little bit of the backstory. So the organization I work with for housing justice, we started the first safe parking program for people living in their cars in the whole San Gabriel Valley. And we started it here in Pasadena at Trinity Lutheran Church. And we started it under the radar because Pasadena did not allow these programs. So it was an illegal program when we started it. City found out. We, instead of shutting us down, they gave us a temporary conditional use permit. And after some lobbying, that became a minor conditional use permit. But part of the requirement was we have to have community meetings with the neighbors around the church. So we had our first community meeting this past week, and some people showed up, a few, weren't many, but they were opposed to the program and wanted to shut it down. And one guy was a bit belligerent. And so I kind of started to get into a shouting match with him. And the pastor had to step in and break it up. So I didn't use violence, but I really wanted to. And I think the only reason I didn't is because I knew it would look bad. So all that to say is I'm not good at this, but it is part of, I'm not good at nonviolent resistance to injustice, but it is part of the gospel, so here we are. So,
as I was preparing for this, I like the line from Walter Wink. When he opened up his teachings, he would say, "This is nonviolence for violent people." So here we are as violent people. We recognize that. We're not special as Mennonites. We're trying to practice and learn too. So thanks for starting that way, Bert.
Yeah, I just felt after that happened this week, I felt I really needed to make that disclaimer. So one thing that Katerina and I thought we should do first is establish the context for our passage today. So while traditionally, at least in the churches where I grew up, Christians tend to read the text as if it were written yesterday in English, so we can immediately apply it to our context without any contextual translation. We want to emphasize that the context in which Jesus taught these things and our own context are very different. Jesus was living in ancient Galilee under a very brutal Roman occupation. If we want a modern analogy, the situation that Jesus and his disciples were in is more like the situation of Palestinians in the West Bank than it is our situation here. So traditional readings have tended to overlook the Roman occupation, although it is more and more recognized. Have any of you watched the series The Chosen? Does anybody here watch that? Yeah. So it's a series, a popular series that's been out the last few years telling the story of Jesus. They create a lot of backstories for characters in the gospel. And whatever else you may think about it, they really depict the Roman occupation as a harsh occupation and reality in their lives. So this is kind of new in sort of our Western understandings. But even that, it's a little bit sanitized. The Roman occupation was even harsher than depicted in that series. The Romans extracted so much wealth, and especially food, because a lot of the taxes were paid in crops. They extracted so much that malnutrition and starvation were actually common in ancient Galilee. The majority of the population lived at or below subsistence level. The Romans ruled with an iron fist. There were frequent uprisings, and they were often very quickly and ruthlessly put down because the Romans had secret police and informants that could keep them informed of when such things were going to happen. So it is in this context that Jesus taught his followers to turn the other cheek. So I'm going to give the mic back to Katerina, who's going to talk about that.
So to do this, I'm going to need 2 volunteers, ideally right-handed folks, the majority. Anybody want to volunteer? Come on up, Carol. Don't worry, you're not going to get hit today for real. We're just going to pretend, Lila. Come on up. So we're just going to say that the taller person here, which I think is Carol, is the person with more power in this dynamic. And one person, Lila, will be the one who is pretending to be hit. Carol is going to be the one who is pretending to hit. So be very, just take a breath. Yeah. Hope there's not actual conflict between you two right now, but okay. So, and Carol, you're right-handed. So I'm just going to ask you to face each other. And Jesus said in his teaching, do not resist an evil person. If someone hits you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. So I'm going to ask you to pretend to punch Lila on her right cheek. Right cheek, yeah. So how are you going to punch? Yeah. So we're seeing the difficulty, right? Oh, yeah. So she figured it out. This is the difficulty here. We hear this passage today, and we're thinking hit. Our translation said slap, which is probably more accurate. So you can't really hit somebody if you're right-handed, which the majority of folks are, on the right cheek, right? If you make a fist, it's pretty hard, like you showed, to try to hit her on the right cheek. What was happening here is what Carol actually did. So can you demonstrate that again with your backhand? So Carol figured out to hit on the right cheek is actually a backhand, right? A backhanded slap.
In fairness, somebody mentioned this in church. I don't remember who shared it. Troy shared it.
Thank you. Yeah, so I wouldn't have thought of it, except, yeah. So thank you so much. You can go ahead and sit down. We've modeled that very well. Thank you. And so you can't hit someone on the right cheek unless it's a backhand. Why wouldn't you use your left hand to hit somebody in that kind of society? Does anybody know what the left hand would be used for? Some people know. Some bathroom things. I've lived or visited countries where that still happens today. In parts of India, you don't want to eat with your left hand or shake somebody's hand with your left hand. The left hand is considered unclean because it's used to wipe with in the bathroom or for other reasons. This is partly what, or in countries today where my ancestors would have been from. There are even parts of the world where there's still shame around certain practices, or shame used today around using your left hand. And so in an honor-shame society, you don't want to use your left hand to shake hands, to touch someone, to hit somebody, but to use your right hand. The backhanded slap connotes somebody in a dominant position slapping down to someone. So it's a superior to an inferior, putting somebody in their place. And unfortunately, in Roman society, that would be more like master-slave relationships, or even men to women or children relationships, to basically confirm, to reinforce a sense of hierarchy or power or control over. So the backhanded slap, when somebody hits you on the right cheek with their backhand, what would it mean to say, turn to them that other cheek also? Turn to them your left cheek. So in order to hit somebody on the left cheek, you have to actually use your fist, right? So that is in Wink's understanding, that is an invitation to say, hey, hit me like a human to human. Hit me like we're equals. Why don't you go ahead and do this without hitting back, without mirroring that violence or returning evil to evil. Turning the other cheek is a motion or an invitation to say, if you want to fight, go for it. If you're gonna hit me with as if I'm a person with dignity, with equal standing to you. So what Jesus is teaching here is creative ways to resist evil, not to just accept passively, not to return in kind, to hit somebody back in the same way, but to show dignity, to reclaim respect or value. And as I was thinking about what are modern examples of this, when do we see this happening today? One story came to mind that I had heard on a civil rights learning tour from a person who was organizing alongside students, the Student Nonviolent Organizing Committee or SNCC in the South during the times of the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. And he said, one time, as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was entering a public lobby, a white man came up to him who was clearly disgusted by what King was doing, was angry about the rising sense of resistance to white supremacy that was happening. And he came up and said, "Are you Dr. King?" And he spit right in his face, just hawked a big one right at him. And Dr. King, without even missing a beat, because people had been training in this form of creative nonviolence, he calmly took out his handkerchief, wiped it off his face, and said, "This, sir, I think belongs to you." And returned the spit to that person with, I imagine, a kind of glimmer in his eye and maybe a flicker of a smile. And instead of it choosing to let that humiliate him, that act of someone who thought they were superior, spitting at someone who they thought were inferior because of their race, because of their ideas of race, Dr. King reclaimed humor, reclaimed the upper hand in that situation, and came with a sense of creative nonviolent resistance in just a small moment in returning that spit to that person. And so Bert and I want to share a few modern examples as these, and I just wanted to end this short story with a quote from Dr. King, who said, "Returning violence for violence only multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." And so I think that there's a lot of echo and resonance with Jesus's teachings here, which some of our translations don't quite get at, that sense of, we hear that today and we might think passivity, just turn the other cheek, accept violence. It's not about accepting abuse, and it's been used, unfortunately, to justify violence against women or domestic violence, violence against others who are less than, to sort of passively accept violence. But instead, Jesus is calling on us to use creative resistance tactics to hold on to our dignity, especially those who are being oppressed in situations where power is imbalanced. So I'll pass it to Bert, who's going to model another teaching from Matthew 5.
So next Jesus says, if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, give your coat as well. Is that what it says? Sue you and take your coat, and give them your shirt as well. So if someone were to take your coat, sue you for your coat, and you gave them your shirt as well, what would you be left with? Not enough. Not enough. So yeah. So in our culture today, if you give both or you lose your coat and your shirt, and if you're a man, you'd just be left naked from the waist up. However, in the first century Mediterranean world, it was a little bit worse than that, because they didn't have like a full closet of clothes to return to, and they didn't wear shirts. They basically, in the first century Mediterranean world, you had two pieces of clothing. You had an outer cloak and an inner cloak. So the translation that we get is unfortunate, because it's trying to make it sense to people in the modern English-speaking world. But there's really just two pieces of clothing. If you ended up giving both of them away, then you'd be naked. You'd be completely naked. So that's the image being painted here. Is like, you want to take my coat? Then here's my shirt as well, or here's my inner cloak as well. Here I am, And so it was actually a way of shaming them, because in a lot of traditional honor-shame cultures, the shame fell not on the person naked, but on the person who was looking at them. So when I first read this from Walter Wink, I thought, I like that because it's creative nonviolence, but I wasn't really convinced. I was like, does it really work that way? Because I grew up a little bit in the Middle East, and somehow I missed this when I was over there. So I wasn't quite convinced. And then one day in the summer of 2002, I opened up the Pasadena Star-News, and I read an Associated Press article about these Nigerian women in the Niger Delta who had occupied a Chevron Texaco oil facility. And they not only occupied it, but they held the men who worked there hostage for 10 days, and they were able to extract concessions from Chevron Texaco for their village. And they had no visible weapons with them. The only weapon they had was the threat of removing all their clothes. That was it. So now I read this in the Pasadena Star-News. It was an AP article. But you can still find this on the internet. And so the other day, I just looked it up. And so I found the article from 22 years ago from The Guardian. So because it was multiple news outlets. So this is what the Guardian said 22 years ago. It said, Chevron Texaco has been forced to promise jobs, electricity, and other improvements to villages in the Niger Delta after 600, mainly Itsekiri tribeswomen, stormed the company's huge Esclavas oil terminal, bringing it to a standstill for 10 days. The activists, aged from 30 to 90, were led by a core group of middle-aged women affectionately known as the Mamas. And they had one simple but effective weapon. They threatened to remove all their clothes. The gesture, known as the curse of nakedness, is a traditional way of shaming people and remains as potent as ever. So that shows that Walter Wink has got onto something here. This may be in honor shame, although it doesn't really translate real well into our culture, but in honor shame cultures, this could very well be what Jesus was talking about. Is, you want my cloak, here's my shirt as well, here I am, and shame falls on the oppressor. Creative way of resisting oppression. So then I'm going to hand it off to Katerina for the next one.
So the next verse, Matthew 5, verse 41, is if, any one of the Roman troops forces you to carry a bag for 1 mile, or to carry a pack for 1 mile, carry it another mile. So if anyone forces you to carry a pack for 1 mile, carry it 2. And in this context, it was common in that time for Roman troops, for military soldiers, to be able to basically force people or conscript them into serving by carrying their pack for 1 mile. And there was actually a law, the Lex Angeria, that said that Roman soldiers could put people into compulsory service, but there was some limitations. So just for 1 mile, and it was a constant feature in Palestine in these times, to Persia in late Roman times. Whoever was found on the street could be coerced into service. As we hear in the Gospels, Simon of Cyrene was forced to carry the cross for Jesus. And this was how armies could move great distances and take breaks along the way, sometimes impressing whole villages, not just individuals, into carrying their packs. And there were stories of some villages clearing out ahead of them because they didn't want to be forced into service when the army came through. This was a burdensome practice. I mean, imagine if you're in the middle of your day caring for children or working in the field or making food, and then here they come again calling on you to carry the pack, and you can't protest that or else face severe penalties, I imagine, or even death. It was just a reminder daily of the Roman occupation, that your day could be interrupted at any time by military force. But carrying the pack the 2nd mile would be an infraction of the military code. And with few exceptions, minor infractions like that were left to the discipline of the centurion, the centurion, head of 100 men in Roman service. He might fine the officer, or even have him flogged, or put him on a ration of barley instead of wheat, or maybe make him camp outside of the camp if they heard that this lex Anglia, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but this Roman law was not being honored or fulfilled. So Jesus' teachings here are basically say kind of subvert the law in a playful way. Find ways, to counter this humiliation by reclaiming dignity and a sense of humanity again. The rules may be Caesar's, but how you respond to the rules is by the power of God in you. So Jesus doesn't counsel, it's interesting to me, just overcoming the soldier with niceness or kindness or even befriending the soldier or passively accepting carrying that pack for just a mile. He doesn't counsel violence, like stabbing the soldier and running away, which wouldn't get you very far. In those times, he knew that armed insurrection would be shut down. He showed a way by which the oppressed can recover the initiative and kind of take back that sense of power in a situation that would be very difficult to change on a systemic level. Imagine the soldier's surprise when at the next mile marker, he reluctantly tries to take back the pack, but the civilian says, "Oh no, let me carry it another mile," and kind of moves on ahead. and the soldier has to run to keep up with the person. Who would want to do that? It would totally confuse or confound the soldier. Why would somebody keep carrying this pack, and refuse to stop? So I'm going to role play this and ask somebody who might be willing to play a more oppressive Roman soldier. Anybody in the room? Marilyn, you look like the part. I'm just kidding. Sorry, I'm typecasting. No, just kidding. Not at all. And I will play this. First, you have the pack. This is your heavy pack on your march, and I will play the Jewish peasant at work here, or the person who's being forced into service. And here you are marching on your way, and what happens? Here, take my pack. Carry the pack. Let's go. Whew. All right, we're reaching our first mile marker almost back here. Let's come around this way. Almost there. Oh, that one's black. We'll keep going. This is a long march, Marilyn. All right. Oh, you know what? Thank you so much. I'll just keep going a little bit more. Have you ever heard of this guy Jesus? He's taught us a couple of things. Yeah. I'm gonna take it a second mile for you today, champ. Here we go. All right. Centurion, I just carried this 2 miles, whole 2 miles. What do you think?
You just shamed me.
Thank you, Marilyn. All right. Thank you so much. So modern examples of that was kind of hard to think about, but as I was thinking, I reflected on a recent action. I was part of a group during Holy Week that had been trying to meet with our representative, a group of multi-faith community members and people of conscience who really felt deeply concerned and feel deeply concerned about the ways that our representatives in Congress have called for both humanitarian aid, which is great for the people of Gaza in the midst of genocide, and who are still continuing to vote for or support policies that promote more military aid to Israel. And we felt this is a moral contradiction. You can't keep bombing people and then sending them bread. And so our central message was, send food, send bread, not bombs. And we decided to go through a training actually here in this church on creative nonviolence and direct action in preparation for what could happen, which we anticipated being arrested potentially for our actions. But we didn't want to return evil with evil. We wanted to still try to meet and extend the hand to meet face-to-face with our representative, knowing that she was likely to refuse, but to still try and prepare for the worst in case that she didn't want to meet with us. So we went to their office on a Monday. We knocked on the door. We had actually bought communion bread from this church that we had baked in hopes that we could extend that bread as a symbol of the kind of aid, the kind of food that we wanted to see them providing so to the people who are in such a desperate situation, facing famine, facing in the midst of starvation right now. And we decided if they didn't allow us to meet with our representative who was in district at that time, that we would just wait. It wasn't illegal to just wait outside the office, but we would kind of push that legality a little further, and that's what ended up happening. They didn't let us into the office where we may have done a sit-in, but they did say, the representative doesn't have you on her schedule, even though we had tried multiple times to get on that schedule. So we said, well, we're happy to just wait out here for our representative. We know that she's in town, and we really feel like this is important for her to hear. She hasn't made time to meet with us, and so we'll just wait here. And so we started singing songs, and we started praying. It was a powerful action of coming together with people who are Jewish, Muslim, no faith, and entering into a time of lament outside their office that actually the staffer gave us time for and listened to, and you could tell at some points felt uncomfortable. At one point came out to say, like, a neighbor has called the police on you all. You need to quiet, you need to stop this, or know that the police are on their way. And we said, thank you. We are prepared. We know what might be coming. And continued to sing and pray together there, and to read statements, share stories of people who've been killed in a genocide. And it was a way of extending that sense of pressure, a sense of waiting. We weren't doing anything to harm the other people. We weren't doing anything violent against the staffer, but we realized that we did gain a sense of power from that action because they were afraid of bad press, and the police didn't end up getting coming. They didn't end up getting called because of their sense of we could be shamed when it's shown in the newspapers that these people have been asking for a meeting, that clergy members are here getting arrested, that young people, that homeschool moms are getting arrested who are in our group, using that power of shame, even in our society today, where it may not be the same as Jesus' times, but there is still that sense of being able to use shame. And then afterwards, we got an email just a week later saying, we want to meet with you all. So it was interesting to me that it sometimes takes kind of reclaiming a sense of power through active nonviolence for for people to be able to respect the message or the authority or the what the other has to say in situations where there's imbalance, which usually as a white person in North America, as a woman, I don't often feel those sense of, I would probably be more on the side of the Romans today than on the side of the Jewish peasants in that day. And yet, with our representatives feeling unreachable or out of reach, I found myself with this group in a lesser power dynamic and having to call on creative tools to sort of come into that place to even be able to meet together. And just recently, this past week, Judy Chu, our representative, was one of very few representatives who did not vote for the aid package. And we were surprised by that. And I don't claim that it was our group that did that, but we were part of a movement that's been building pressure, and you all have been a part of, that she did not vote for that military aid package, including billions of dollars for Israel.
So I just want to finish with a little reflection on the text. And that is, if our, or Walter Wink's, reading of the passage is correct, then it is consistent with the rest of the gospel narrative, which leads to the cross. Just as in each case, the person or the peasant takes initiative, sort of leaning into the oppressive act, thereby transforming it into shame on the oppressor, So also Jesus doesn't resist the cross, but goes to the cross as if it's a victorious event for him. And the early church understood the cross not only as victory, but also as a shaming of the powers and authorities that crucified Jesus, namely the Romans. Colossians 2:15 reads like this: Jesus disarmed the rulers and authorities and made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in the cross. He made a public spectacle of them. He shamed them, triumphing over them in the cross. Jesus turned the other cheek, took the initiative by leaning into the oppressive act, thereby disarming and shaming the empire. So I think that is just a really profound and difficult to understand principle. That is how the gospel works. So I think, if Walter Wink is reading these texts correctly, if we're reading these texts correctly like this, then it fits in with the whole narrative of the cross as the victory that shames the powers.